Eden Zero was a show I really enjoyed despite its numerous flaws. I didn't get a chance to watch the second batch of episodes when they dropped on Netflix last year, since I was visiting family at the time. Over the next couple of months, I plan on finishing up a lot of series that I haven't had a chance to watch. So a few weeks ago, I decided to finally watch the rest of the season, and I figured I might as well do a video sharing my thoughts on it. I already did a review on the first half of the season, which you should check out if you haven't already. The second half of the season picks up where the show left off, with Shiki and the crew discovering Hermit while traveling through space. This batch of episodes covers 3 arcs, which consist of the group traveling to several planets to find and retrieve the last 2 shining stars, Hermit and Homer's master, Valkyrie. The first several episodes focuses on them trying to help Hermit upon discovering that she fled to a digital planet after her heart was broken. The first arc largely takes place in a video game world called Digitalis, where the NPCs have become sentient. Shiki and the others dive into the virtual world in search of Hermit and eventually encounter a serial killer playing using the name Jamilov. This was a solid story arc that introduced Hermit, a character whose backstory conveys once again the capacity of humanity to be cruel. I like the idea of her fleeing from the real world after what happened to her. It's quite fitting considering that she likes video games, which are often used as a form of escapism for many people. Series creator Hiro Mishima applies the previously established idea of machines being truly alive and capable of expressing genuine human emotions to the NPCs that inhabit Digitalis. Mishima takes the Sora Online approach to the game world, in which dying in the game results in death in the real world. Aside from the NPCs being self-aware of their roles in the game, the author doesn't really do anything interesting with the setting. However, there are some funny scenes that take advantage of the customizable in-game avatars Shiki and his friend select. Also, I love Pino's human avatar design. While the Digitalis arc has some good introductions for future antagonists, unfortunately Jamilov is another uninteresting one-dimensional villain. He's just a murdering psychopath playing God in a virtual world. The only memorable thing about Jamilov is the avatar's character design. Moreover, the person outside the game isn't worth talking about. Thankfully, aside from Jamilov, the new villains presented in the show's second half are a major step up from the previous ones. Dragon Joe's introduction scene where he punishes the guy for not paying back his debt on time was great, as it showcased how intimidating he can be. As of right now, his only goal seems to be making money, which is something he has in common with the main villain of the Sun Jewel arc, Madame Kurenai, although he approaches it with a more business-like mindset. This character doesn't play a huge role in the rest of the season, but it seems like he could potentially be a good villain in the next season. Before I talk about the next story arc, I wanted to briefly comment on the action and animation in this arc. There were a couple of standout action scenes, one when Shiki is attacking Jamilov at the end of their fight, and Homer's encounter with a GIA agent. They weren't super impressive, but they were the most memorable out of the scenes from this arc. Unfortunately, some of the action scenes had limited animation in which a character would attack and then the camera would scroll in one direction. There was one particular scene that featured a horde of monsters in which the animation wasn't very smooth. The Mildian arc starts near the end of the final episode of the Digitalis arc and is very short. After things with Hermit are resolved and she decides to join them on their journey to find Mother, they head to the planet Mildian to ask the Time Oracle about Valkyrie's whereabouts. Xiao Mei, the character that usually serves as the narrator, takes a more active role at this particular point in the story. In the first half of the season, the character seemed like an unnecessary addition, which turned out to not be the case at all. In order to obtain the information they seek, Shiki and the others are required to fight against opponents in Xiao Mei's Battle Coliseum. With the exception of Homer's battle, I initially thought that these fights seemed like filler given how unremarkable the opponents they faced were and how easily they took care of them. However, this was by design, and the reveal of the significance of these fights later on in the season really made me appreciate them afterwards. Homer's fight was the most engaging out of the 4 rounds, in which some of her backstory is shown as she struggled against her opponent. The season's final arc takes place on the planet Sun Jewel as Shiki, Homer, Rebecca, Happy, and Pino search for Valkyrie. There is a lot more focus on Homer as the show fleshes her out while providing a backstory for Valkyrie and presenting a villain that perfectly contrasts their more righteous qualities. The first episode was very entertaining with the introduction of the mysterious Captain Connor prior to the Eden Zero crew arriving at the Golden Palace on Sun Jewel. The scenes with him interacting with everyone on the ship were hilarious. There's one particular scene with Pino that I won't spoil that totally caught me off guard. Anyway, once Shiki and the others arrive on Sunjul, they go to the Golden Palace Casino to get information on Valkyrie. Near the end of the episode, there's a scene that occurs after Shiki and Homura take down some robbers that grab my attention immediately. This particular scene establishes Madame Kurenai as a big threat by showing how severely the criminals were punished using her surveillance satellite. Madame Kurenai is hands down the best villain so far, but I guess that isn't saying much considering how lackluster Eliga and Seabear were. Kurenai is such a despicable character whose selfish actions are driven by greed as she lives luxuriously off the backs of laborers. Given what is revealed about her, I was dreading the possibility of her having a change of heart or realizing the error of her ways. Thankfully, Madame Kurenai was pure scum to the very end, and she gets her comeuppance in a very satisfying way. There is a particular scene that I really want to talk about, so if you want to avoid spoilers, skip ahead to the time on screen. With that said, I love how things are resolved at the end between Homura and Madame Kurenai. Despite everything her mother has done, Homura still shows respect for who she is to her biologically speaking, while also making it clear that she feels nothing toward her now. The contrasting qualities of these characters is on full display in this scene and the moments afterward when Kurenai is running away, such as Kurenai's deceitfulness as she lies about how she was always thinking about her daughter, or how she pretends to be grateful to Homura for letting her go. This was such a terrific scene, and the music that kicks in the moment Homura bows to her mother amplifies the emotional impact of the scene, especially when she starts talking about how Valkyrie loved and cared for her. Mishima really nails the emotional moments in this season's final arc, especially during its climax. The author is very effective at getting the audience to sympathize with Homura's situation. There is a scene with Homura about midway through the arc that was truly sad. Aside from her, there was also a great scene near the end of the last episode with Witch and Sister that shows the characters at their most vulnerable. For the most part, the writing in this story arc is an improvement from the previous ones. In my review of the first half, I criticized the dialogue for being repetitive and basic. There is still a lot of friendship talk throughout the second half of Eden Zero. That's to be expected. There is definitely still room for improvement. However, I have to give Hiro Mishima credit. He actually has some fantastic dialogue and quite a few scenes in the Sunjul arc. Madame Kurenai's exchange with Shiki when they clash was surprisingly good. The dialogue between Homura and Kurenai in the final episode was great too. There was one instance where I thought the writing could have been better though. In the penultimate episode, there is a conflict that I believe could have been resolved easily. In order to explain, I'll need to talk about some spoilers, so skip to the time on screen if necessary. There is a point in the episode where Weiss and Rebecca go to an armory for a change of clothes and are told to bring back supplies for the resistance who are fighting off Kurenai's punishers. Nino locks the place down to prevent Rebecca and Weiss from resupplying the resistance fighters. He engages Rebecca in combat with his ether gear, in which Rebecca has no choice but to use one of the weapons from the armory. At this point, Weiss can't help Rebecca since the door to his dressing room was locked down. During this fight, Rebecca finally awakens her ether gear upon reflecting on the Colosseum battles they went through. While I think this was a clever way to incorporate those seemingly insignificant matches, the whole fight between Rebecca and Nino could have been avoided if she just used Pino's EMP ability. I know that she would have been able to activate it since in the prior episode Pino says that it finished charging. Assuming Nino has no physical strength, and his ether gear was the only thing making him a threat to Rebecca or Weiss, they would have been able to freely leave the place after the EMP was used. Yes, I realized that if this happened, we wouldn't have gotten the big reveal with Rebecca's leaper ability, but this simple solution was something I couldn't stop thinking about even after rewatching this scene. Despite how the situation was handled, this was still a cool and memorable moment for Rebecca that ties back into some of Xiaomei's internal dialogue earlier in the season, and of course pays off those baiting scenes. Besides Rebecca's brief fight with Nino, there were several other notable action scenes in this arc. Weiss's fight against Baku showcased his new weapon and was entertaining and well animated. I think there is a nod to a certain Marvel character in that scene, and perhaps it was Mishima's inspiration for Weiss's new weapon. There was also an awesome moment with Homura and one of Kurenai's subordinates near the end of the season. The inevitable showdown between Shiki and Madame Kurenai had the scale and scope you would expect from a major battle, with it eventually being dragged out into the city. In one scene, Shiki is shown using his gravity ether gear to maneuver and dodge Kurenai's attacks as he chases him through the Golden Palace. Much like the casino action scene at the beginning of the arc, in both cases the animation was solid. There was even a brief switch to a third-person perspective at one point. Going to briefly mention some spoilers for this fight, so you know the drill by now. I wish we got to see Kurenai fight Shiki a bit more before she got into her night gear, the Kurenai Dragoon. Just like the night gear Seabeer piloted, it is rendered in 3D as opposed to drawn in 2D. At least this giant robot didn't stand out as much as the last one he faced. The conclusion of the fight was fairly gratifying, and I appreciate how Mishima wrote the last moments of the battle. Shiki's last attack was a clever use of his power, and I'm glad that the author avoided trampling over the new concept of ether coding that is introduced in this arc. In addition to ether coding, the show also presents a method that restricts the use of ether gear, which I think is kind of dumb, but actually makes sense considering how ether gear works. Other series like One Piece have special items like Sea Prism Stone that prevent characters from using their special powers. Since that isn't the case here, I believe the author could have elaborated on why the method shown is effective at nullifying ether gear usage. Anyway, as a whole, the Sunjo arc was very entertaining, and it finally delivered a compelling villain alongside plenty of emotional moments and some exciting action scenes. Something I forgot to talk about in my review for this show's first half is the voice acting for the English dub. The performances are good, especially Sean Chiplock and Laura Stahl as Shiki and Homura respectively. They both nailed the emotional and comedic scenes. Chiplock can sell the cheesiest lines and make them sound cool. I think the weakest one out of the main cast would be Kira Buckland as Rebecca, whose line delivery could sometimes be flat. As you might expect, there's still a lot of fan service scenes with Rebecca and plenty of fairy tale cameos. While the various cameos and references to Mishima's other works are nice to look at periodically, I wouldn't mind seeing less in them going forward. Also, this might be obvious, but Mishima loves playing around with the designs of his characters. He always manages to write in scenarios where a character changes their outfit. There was a very amusing dress-up scene before they reached Mildian that was arguably unnecessary, even though it stemmed from a prior agreement between Weiss and Homura. Nevertheless, I'm glad to see that some of the newly introduced characters like Madame Kurenai and Amira have unique appealing designs, given that the designs for this show were previously a point of criticism. Overall, the second half of Eden Zero is definitely an improvement over the first dozen episodes in certain areas. I really enjoyed this last batch of episodes, and I'm looking forward to what happens next in the story. Let me know what you guys thought about the second half of the season in the comment section below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.